On Nationwide this evening, a must-watch for all sports fans as we look back on the career of one of this country's greatest soccer players, the late Seán Fallon from Sligo. Recorded not long before his death, we reminisce with the man about the great days when he played for Ireland, and we meet one of the world's top soccer managers, Sir Alex Ferguson, who talks fondly of his Irish friend, the Sligo legend that was Seán Fallon. This evening we're in Sligo for a special programme about the life and times of an extraordinary Irish sporting legend who passed away last month in his 91st year. At the time of his death, Seán Fallon was the oldest former Republic of Ireland soccer international. And to soccer fans at home and abroad, but especially for Sligo people, Seán Fallon was an iconic figure at Celtic Football Club. He was a role model and admired by his wide circle of friends, including Sir Alex Ferguson, who delivered the eulogy at his funeral.
My Football Association of Ireland? Yes!
On Tuesday, January the 15th, we were in the Glasgow home of Seán and Myra Fallon. A clutch of Seán's 19 grandchildren was with him, playing with some of the 8 caps he won while playing for the Republic of Ireland. Age 90, Seán was Ireland's oldest living soccer international and a legend of the famous Celtic Football Club. Our interview with him that Tuesday evening would be the last time Seán put his thoughts and memories on the record, because 3 days later, after a sudden illness, Seán Fallon passed away. This programme, including Seán's final interview, is the story of a remarkable man.
He was always there for advice. You could always depend on Seán that way. And he was always supportive, and he was always an encourager rather than, that you do this or do that. He would always encourage you to do the right things, and I always appreciated that. We developed a terrific friendship.
Huge crowds came to his funeral. Footballers like Kenny Dalglish, who had been signed by him for Celtic. Supporters who had watched him when he captained Celtic during the 1950s and when he won the name of the Iron Man. He was the player from the era before substitutes were allowed who refused to leave the field even though he had a broken collarbone. Alex Ferguson, the Glaswegian he had mentored as he learned the ropes in football management. The friend who would deliver the eulogy at his funeral mass. John Delaney representing the Football Association of Ireland. Tony Quinn representing Sligo Rovers, the League of Ireland club from Seán's hometown. Tommy Gemmell, scorer of Celtic's first goal in their 2-1 victory over Inter Milan in Lisbon, when they became the first British club to win the European Cup. That Celtic side was managed by Jock Stein and his lifelong friend, assistant manager Seán Fallon. Packy Bonner, Ireland's legendary goalkeeper from Italia 90, one of Seán's last signings for Celtic. Neil Lennon, the Celtic manager, and members of the current first-team squad. To that final farewell came the different layers and generations of the Celtic and Irish families, all keen to show solidarity with Seán's loved ones, his wife Myra, their 5 daughters, son and 19 grandchildren, his 2 sisters, the last surviving siblings from a family of 10. The congregation in the church included the current and former managers of Glasgow Rangers, Ali McCoist and Walter Smith. Their presence gave a sense of how Seán had crossed so many divides during his life. When Queen Elizabeth made history by undertaking what was the first state visit to a post-independence Ireland by a British monarch, her itinerary included a trip to the War Memorial Gardens at Island Bridge. Alongside President Mary McAleese, she remembered the Irish citizens who had fought in the Great War. The ceremony was testimony to the complex relationship between the neighbouring islands. The attendance that afternoon at Island Bridge was acknowledgement of a subset of Irish men and women whose valour and pain were sometimes overlooked or put to one side in their homeland. Their situation was easily understood by Seán Fallon, Celtic icon, a devout Catholic who said the rosary every day of his life. His father, John, had been a British Army soldier, wounded in action during the First World War.
He joined quite young. He had been in around 17, I would imagine. And he initially went to Enniskillen, where they were trained, very short training, I believe, and then they ended up in Europe. And shortly after landing there, he was wounded in his right shoulder, was shattered, and he was sent back here eventually to the hospital, which we were treated in the hospital in Blackrock, in the clinic there.
Seán's father, John, was from Sligo. It was what was known as a garrison town, where British soldiers were stationed before the birth of the Irish state. In working class areas of places like Sligo, there was a long tradition of young men finding employment by enlisting in the British Army. John Fallon was part of that tradition. After his recovery and discharge, he returned to his hometown. For the next 50 years, this father of 10 worked voluntarily on behalf of soldiers and their families, helping them to get their entitlements.
He became secretary of the British Legion here in Sligo. And at that time, people would approach him on a regular basis, or he'd go and visit them in their homes and fill up their forms. And these would be to apply for a British pension, or else it would be for some help. Usually around the Christmas time, there was a lot of activities because they got some means there. They would go, Blackwoods would have been where he would send them, and they would get food there, and also the old shops, Johnston's and Lyons's, would also get some help from them for bedding. And the children then as well, the school children, would get school books and uniforms. And this was all supplied by the British Legion, funds from the British Legion. And of course he was very responsible here for organising the Poppy Day, which occurred in November. He was, as you know, a councillor and local councillor here, and for years and years, and on the corporation, of course, local corporation. And it was only the latter stage of his life that he got to be mayor, because of the fact that I think he was associated with the British Legion. And it was, I think, in his late 70s, he was twice mayor. But for years and years, I would say it didn't help in that respect.
The garrison town tradition partly helps to explain Sligo's love affair with soccer. But there were other elements in that relationship. Ballymote, 17 miles from Sligo town, was the home of Andrew Cairns. As brother Walfred, a member of the Marist Order working in Scotland, he founded Celtic Football Club for the emigrant Irish in the city of Glasgow. The Marist brothers had a number of schools in Sligo, and as Seán was educated by the brothers, he often heard of the link between his hometown and the Scottish Football Club. He worked in a local bakery, but in those early formative years, he showed an interest in physical fitness that put him years ahead of his peers.
When I worked on McCarthy's, you had to start early in the morning. But I used to get up early at home and run up to the well, say my morning prayers, and back and then into McCarthy's. People say, that fella mad, he's out in the morning running. That's a fact, you know. A lot of people at that time, they weren't doing any running. But later on, I'm told, there was quite a lot of people running, keeping themselves, you know, really fit. And that story went round, he's out in the morning running, he's off his bloody head, you know.
That early morning stretch to Tubernault, the Holy Well, was a 7-mile trip. Ross's Point was a 10-mile stretch. Seán also regularly swam in the Atlantic. He became a great Gaelic footballer, and in the 1940s he lined up against the legendary Kerry goalkeeper Dan O'Keefe. That National League match was actually played in Sligo Showgrounds, the home of Sligo Rovers.
The reason the Gaelic game in the late 40s was hosted in the Showgrounds was because of the crowd. Other venues simply hadn't the capacity to take it. And Seán showed his prowess by scoring 2 goals against a famous Kerry goalkeeper of the time, and who was named in the team of the century.
Scored 2 goals, Dan O'Keefe. Nice man. I spoke to him, I can still remember talking to him after the game. I says, "Are you a bugger?" So "You're a bugger." No, I said, "I'm a Fallon." "I don't want to meet any more Fallons," he said. Dan O'Keefe, a good goalkeeper. Very good goalkeeper indeed. And then, even better still, a nice person.
A desire to become a full-time soccer player brought Seán across the border to Glenavon. He had played for Sligo Rovers and Longford Town, but he thought Glenavon might provide a better chance to be spotted by scouts from cross-channel clubs. While playing for the Irish League against the League of Ireland, he was watched by representatives of Glasgow Celtic. He was on his way to paradise.
Well, I didn't show it, but I felt like I had $1 million in my pocket. You know, that's the best way I can describe that, because that was a dream. I knew my dad would be delighted, you know.
Dad has hopefully caught the faith from his parents, and I'd say, you know I've caught my faith from my father.
At her Glasgow home, Seán Fallon sifts through memorabilia from her father's life with Stephen Sullivan, who will publish Seán Fallon's biography later this year. Seán is one of the 6 Fallon children. The family archive is extensive. As full-back or centre-forward, Seán made 254 appearances for Celtic. He captained the side and made Jock Stein his vice-captain. One of the letters he received calling him up to play for the Republic of Ireland. It included the PS, "Bring your boots and leg guards." He always kept in touch with his hometown. The Sligo champion was dispatched to him weekly in Glasgow. He was a big-name player who featured in the likes of Charles Buchan's Football Monthly. In one story, he told how soccer was a gentle game compared to his experiences as a GAA player. When his playing days ended, Seán Fallon remained part of the Celtic family. He became assistant manager to Jock Stein. Sometimes on Saturday nights, the pair would go for dinner with their wives to a restaurant called the Beechwood near Hampden Park. They would be joined by an ambitious young man, keen to learn.
We used to go to this little restaurant just down the road from us. I lived only about a mile from Seán and Jock Stein. And we used to get in there every Saturday night, my wife and I. And for some reason, we always seemed to be in the next table to Seán and his wife Myra and Jock and his wife Jean. And it was nothing but football. I don't know how the wives put up with it, to be honest with you. But that was the first contest. That would be about 1965 or something like that, you know, around about that time. And through that, I became very friendly with him.
I remember that. Alec, we were very friendly at that time, and he wanted to do well at football. And I'd love to see that.
And I always remember when my mother died, he came to the funeral. I was surprised to see that, you know, because he never knew my mother, but he respected the fact that he was a friend of mine. So I've always cherished his friendship because he's such a really top man.
You never had a lower age stage in life when you're going to lose your parents. And God, if you haven't got time to support the upbringings, the sons or the daughters, well, there's something wrong. And particularly when you know the person involved who's lost a parent. And I think it was the right thing to do. Get them a wee help, maybe.
I think one is completely an honest man. There's no edge or side to him whatsoever. What you see is what you get with Seán. Plus the other factor, I think it's a very fantastic quality, and I say this all the time, loyalty. Loyalty to the people around about him, loyalty to his family, to his friends. He would never let anyone down. If you're a friend of Seán Fallon, he would never let you down. And that loyalty, I must say, is not prevalent in modern day life, you know, the way we would like it to be. But Seán is shredded in his life that he's got that great loyalty to his friends and family. I think it's a wonderful attribute.
Alex Ferguson remembering his loyal friend Seán Fallon. After the break, Packy Bonner tells what he thought of him. And we hear the advice Seán gave 3 days before he passed away.
You know, normally our midfield men, Bobby and Bertie, these are the men here we want to get playing. So these men here.
The most successful period in the history of Glasgow Celtic was under the management team of Jock Stein and Sligo-born Seán Fallon. Stein was an extraordinary coach. Fallon had the gift of spotting and nurturing young talent. With the squad of players mostly drawn from the greater Glasgow area, Celtic battled through to the 1967 European Cup final. Thousands of fans headed south to Portugal. Celtic defeated Inter Milan 2-1 in Lisbon's Stadium of Light. The team became known as the Lisbon Lions. While trawling through the archives working on Seán Fallon's biography, Stephen Sullivan became aware of how important Seán Fallon was in identifying young players for Celtic.
In 2002, when Celtic named their greatest ever team as voted for by the fans, over half of that team were Seán Fallon signings. You know, and I mentioned that when Radio 5 Live did a documentary on the best post-war British 11, there were two Scots in that team, both Seán Fallon signings, Danny McGrain and Kenny Dalglish. His record was amazing. I mean, he was. A lot of people said that Fallon signed them and Stein placed them. You know, Fallon couldn't have been successful without Stein. There's no doubt about that. But Stein needed Fallon, and the players, the Lisbon Lions, were almost all in place by the time that Jock Stein arrived. He signed Willie Wallace, but the Lions were there in place, ready to be moulded into this fantastic team. And then later, Seán brought in players that formed a new team that could have been equally as good, the Quality Street kids. The Douglashes, the McGrains, the Lou McCarrys, these were all Seán Fallon signings, Davy Hayes. And it was only the fact that Celtic, again, became a bit of a selling club, that the ambition didn't match the ambition of the players, the wages didn't match the wages down south, that they didn't become another Lisbon Lions because they had all the talent.
Timote against Bonner.
One of Seán Fallon's last signings before he left the club later became the most famous goalkeeper in the history of Irish soccer.
Any ex-player you speak to that he was responsible for signing, I think that was hugely important part of his job, to make them feel confident. They were actually coming into a family, they were leaving a family but coming to a new family, and Seán being the father figure. And especially if you were Irish, and him being Irish, then it was fantastic. And but any time you met him, he had this almighty handshake, you know, a real probably Scottish Irish handshake, but it was strong. You felt warm when you met him, and he always asked you, "How is your mother?" Again, a very Irish thing. How is your mother back home? And I think that's what sort of made me feel that I was coming to a club that was going to look after me and be part of my life for the next 19 years.
You got to get by the parents. That's very important. And you got to be loyal to the parents. And if the boys, if they didn't look after themselves as well as they should, we told the parents. They didn't like it, but I told them anyway. I told them, say, that's boy, you need to work harder on him.
The manner in which Stein and Fallon left Celtic was far from perfect. Later, Seán Fallon would be offered money to tell bad stories about the club, but he was having none of it.
He's someone with just incredible values. You know, when he left Celtic, he was offered a lot of money at the time, and he hadn't come away with Celtic, you know, with some great nest egg or anything. He was offered a lot of money to dish the dirt and to go against Celtic. But if you ever see any Seán Fallon interviews, he's one of the most pro-Celtic men you could possibly meet. And I mean, I feel that sometimes when you meet someone that you've admired for a long time, you know, they can disappoint you. And the more I've learned about Seán Fallon, the more I've admired him.
When Seán Fallon turned 80 in 2002, Celtic supporters Sean Cunningham and Paddy Doherty arranged a birthday party for him in Sligo. The Lisbon Lions came to the event. So too did Alex Ferguson. While over, he signed Rio Ferdinand while he played golf in Ross's Point. In 1994, Seán was awarded the Freedom of Sligo. The mayor at the time was especially proud that it happened on his watch. His father and Seán's father had served together as Fine Gael councillors.
Seán was a fantastic ambassador for Sligo. He was born and reared here in Sligo, but he never forgot his roots for all the years that he was in Glasgow, and indeed on a regular basis, maybe every year, Seán and his family would come back to Sligo and would always keep in touch with what's happening in Sligo, knew more about what's happened in Sligo than maybe some of us that were living here.
Thank you very much, Seán. Seán's 90th birthday last year coincided with the 125th anniversary of Celtic. He was asked to unfurl the league title flag at the club's headquarters. It was an occasion full of symbolism.
When the board made this decision, there was probably only one candidate who was going to do this really special ceremony for Celtic, and I think that Seán Fallon was obviously the man for that. It's always been a significant day here at Celtic Park. I remember coming here as a boy in the old stadium in the 1970s and 1980s, and the chairman would come in at one end in a Rolls Royce and drive halfway around the stadium and get out in front of what was the jungle just behind us here and unfurl the flag. And I think in terms of this particular event with Seán Fallon, it was probably more special because it was the first time that we had won the league in 3 years, and it was just a really, really special day for Celtic.
One of the players Seán Fallon signed, Danny McGrain, was recently brought into the Celtic first team setup. Although 90, Seán hadn't forgotten his manners.
I'm now back at the club. I'm now working with the first team. And Seán was one of the first people to give me a phone to congratulate me. And he knows how much I love the club. And for Neil Lennon to have given me the job was great. But to get a phone call from Seán, the guy who signed me when I was only 16, 17, if he hadn't signed me, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Seán played 8 times for Ireland but only received 3 caps. Last October, the FAI agreed to rectify the situation. At a ceremony in Sligo Showgrounds, Seán's only son, Seán Jr., was presented with the 5 missing caps. Those were the very caps Seán proudly showed us the last time we saw him. We didn't know it, but Seán was in his final days. These were his parting thoughts about his eventful life.
No, you got to be honest with yourself, man. I never run people down. Never in my life have I run people down. And if I didn't like people, I might as well tell you I avoided them. Simple as that. They're nice people, I got on great with them. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should, not always, unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. But that, to me, is the way one should live. By being nice to people. If they're not nice to you, well, you just avoid them. So because life's too short to be otherwise. And to help people. If people needed help, and you were in a position to help them, you did that. You went away and you did that. You helped them with all you possibly could. What else can one do in this life? I don't know about the next one. Are you listening up there?
And so the memory of this great sporting legend continues to live on in the minds of soccer fans everywhere, but especially in his hometown of Sligo and here in St Anne's Terrace where he grew up. And so we've come to the end of another Nationwide. We'll have another programme on Monday. Bye for now. On Monday's Nationwide, from North Tipperary, the Church of Ireland rector who led a remarkable and eventful life around the world before receiving a late calling to the church. As he is about to leave the helm of one of the country's foremost charities, we meet Tom Arnold, who recalls his time as head of concern.